people that were exiled, that we call the lost tribes of Israel, will get up and come back to Israel. And it'll start happening all over in the four corners of the world. And they'll just get up and start moving back. And what if it was actually happening? Here you have this prophecy, and people are actually getting up. They may be in your own neighborhood, and they're packing their bags, and to you, they're just somebody else packing their bags and moving. But in actual fact, they're responding to some kind of biblical post-hypnotic suggestion. I'm not talking about 1,000 years, I'm talking about 2,700-year-old suggestion that they're responding to now. And we could actually film these people and match the prophecy with the events. And the reason it should matter is that because once they do what they have to do, they trigger the apocalypse.
لا شاطر عاصم. شاطر عاصم.
On these altars, children were sacrificed in pagan rituals. Scripture tells us that the tribes of Israel deserted the God of their forefathers and worshipped idols in places like this. The prophet said that for this sin, the Israelite tribes would be conquered and exiled until the end of time, when they would be found and redeemed. Megiddo, a fortress city in northern Israel. It is known to the world as Armageddon, a name synonymous with the apocalypse. But it won't happen before the Israelite tribes who once lived here return. According to prophecy, the countdown to the apocalypse and final redemption begins when the tribes are found, one by one. So this is the challenge before us. How are we going to find millions of people that no one has noticed? When I say find them, I don't mean discovering a people that's never made contact with Westerners. I mean taking very obscure pieces of a puzzle and going to very remote, sometimes dangerous places on the earth, and taking those pieces and putting them together and seeing, does this accord with the biblical prophecy? I have been on a journey, and I invite you to go on this journey with me. In the early 1980s, I went to Africa to document the plight of the Falashas, the black Jews of Ethiopia. These people were caught in the midst of persecutions, war, and famine. In 1991, the Falashas made international headlines when they were airlifted by the Israeli Secret Service to Jerusalem. What was little noticed is that the Israelis acted only after the chief rabbi ruled that the Falashas were descendants of the lost tribe of Dan. Can you imagine the lost tribes of Israel making front page news? Can you imagine the government of Israel acting on the words of rabbis who say this is the lost tribe of Dan, and suddenly modern aircraft swooping in to civil war Ethiopia as people from ages ago are airlifted into modern Israel? Seeing the Ethiopians in Jerusalem, I thought, was this just an anomaly? Or was the biblical prophecy beginning to unfold? Seven years after the Falasha airlift in a tomato packing plant near the Gaza Strip, I came across a small group that most Israelis take for Thai guest workers. They are a people who come from the hill country on the India-Burma border. They say they are descendants of the lost tribe of Menashe, and there is at least one rabbi here who believes them.
We have to go and bring them before the Messiah arrives in Israel. Our tradition teaches us that in the end of days, the Jews, who are the descendants of the tribes of Benjamin and Judah, will bring the lost tribes to Israel so that they will participate in Messianic times.
I believe that the whole thing is in the realm of religious belief rather than in the realm of reality. That there is a strong necessity to find the tribes for religious theological reason, both Jewish and Christian. And those are the two religions that are active in.
It's time to laugh and play again, to soar and splash again. It's time to come to Sesame Place. Look for the all-new Big Birds tour bus, now open. Buy a day and get a free second visit.
Nursing's tough to begin with. Day in and in tribe seeking, each one in its own way. And all the attempts to find them, I think, have no sound historical evidence. It is the belief that keeps the 10 lost tribes alive, not the people themselves.
Despite the skeptics, Rabbi Avichal has assisted hundreds of these people to emigrate to Israel and has supervised their formal return to Judaism. Can the rabbi be right? Is the key to the future submerged in these people's past? The story begins 2,900 years ago, when after Solomon's death, his biblical kingdom split into two. In the south, Judea, home to 3 tribes including Judah, which gave its name to modern-day Jews. In the north, there was Israel, home to the people that would later be called the Lost Tribes of Israel. After the prophets predicted the event, the Assyrian Empire bore down on the northern kingdom of Israel.
The Assyrians, they are considered to be the real heavies. I guess you could call them the stormtroopers, the Prussians. They created what many, in fact, would tell you was probably the most potent military machine of its age. That is, sometime from about the end of the second millennium BCE, they began this inexorable march from their headquarters in the upper reaches of the Tigris, what is now eastern Iraq, the borders with Iran. And year after year, campaign after campaign, they just marched westwards. They marched as far as Israel, as far as the coast.
In 721 BCE, the Assyrians put to the torch many Israelite cities and deported most of the population. Most scholars believe that the tribes were lost because in exile they could not have held on to their identities. They must have assimilated.
We are talking about 2,700 years ago. There are historical documentations, historical records, actually found in excavations from, say, the 5th century BC that record Israelite names in Assyria. So at that time, maybe they still existed there, or a trickle of them existed there. After that, there is nothing, no documentation. So if you look at it historically, all kinds of people were exiled and got lost. And I believe that the 10 tribes also got lost.
But what if they are not lost and have preserved the memory of their ancient origins? What if they are waiting in their millions for their prophesied return? hill country where Burma meets India is home to the people called